Graham Hancock's theory on Atlantis, the ending of Atlantis, the Younger Dryas, meltwater pulse 1b, comet impact theory or meteor impact theory. It's called one of those things. And then later on, Göbekli Tepe, how all of those things fit together in Graham Hancock's theory. So in engaging these discussions online since the Flint Dibble Graham Hancock debate, which has just caused so much buzz, great debate, I really enjoyed it, it has occurred to me that many Graham Hancock followers don't know the details of his theory about all of that. The Younger Dryas, the end of Atlantis, which is, there no condescension there, no high-handedness. I don't know the details of the heavy majority of Graham Hancock's theories. However, this is an important one to know, and I think illustrates a few things, including a few things about how Graham Hancock operates. But the actual theory behind this, it seems to be a mystery to most of his supporters, even if they seem to know a great deal about other things. So I am here to help out with this. And I'm going to explain what Graham Hancock's theory is on all of that stuff. And I'm going to be factual. So this is, I'm not going to exaggerate or make things up. I'm going to say literally what Graham Hancock's theory is. But first, some background. So anyone who has been keeping up with Graham Hancock at all over the last 10 years knows that he is thrilled, he's tickled pink about this meteor impact theory, if I have it right, or comet impact Younger Dryas theory. And this says that around 12,800, 12,900 years ago, something in that range, a meteor struck Earth somewhere around Iceland or Greenland, kicked up soot and dust on a much smaller scale, but similar to the meteor that brought it into the dinosaurs, caused a cooling period. So if you look at a graph about the upward temperature trends in the Earth since the peak of the last ice age about 30,000 years ago, the Younger Dryas, which took place between about 12,800 years ago and 11,600, 11,500 or so years ago, looks like just a downward blip for those 1,200 years. And then things get back on track. So the story behind this is full of intrigue and all sorts of stuff you might associate with Graham Hancock. So in 2007, a team of folks got together, not geologists. Some of them had academic credentials. They were professors in other fields, and put together a theory that the Younger Dryas had been started. The catalyst to the Younger Dryas was a meteor impact. They did some tests, some experiments, and kicked up enough dust that it forced the community of professional geologists to respond. And one of the criticisms that they had was that the experiments that they claimed had been done could not be replicated. And if I'm not mistaken, these experiments had to do with soil samples and the type of markers that a meteor strike would leave and this type of thing. Well, on top of this, someone on that team seems to have submitted a photograph or some type of visual something that was doctored, if you can imagine such a thing. Doctored, and this, more drama, disgraced, disbanded this entire comet theory team. However, later on, it was discovered that those experiments could be replicated. And in the last 10 or so years, the number of people, geologists within academia, who have begun subscribing to the meteor impact theory has grown. As best I can tell, they are still a minority. The majority position among geologists who study that kind of thing is that the Gulf Stream altered for those 1,200 years. But who knows? It could be the case that it will be discovered conclusively that the Younger Dryas was caused by a meteor. So Graham Hancock, to his credit, he was not part of this team, but from the beginning, he was co-signing this. He was on board with this meteor strike, right? We have to explain why there's no physical evidence of Atlantis. There was calamity, this type of thing. The Earth was shaken, and so there's not much of Atlantis left. So Hancock is very happy. And at some of these presentations that I've seen, they're in stadiums similar to like TED Talk. He's been kicked off of TED Talk, but those kinds of things. And he will go on and on about how Luis Alvarez in the 1960s came up with the theory of a meteor strike bringing an end to the dinosaurs. He was ridiculed. Hancock seems rather sensitive to any kind of critique of any kind. He was ridiculed. He was persecuted. I don't know if Hancock went that far with Luis Alvarez, but he brings up characters like this in the past, hoping that the audience will see him as within this tradition of people who came up with game-changing ideas about how things have been done in different academic spheres, different areas of interest. Later, they were proved to be correct. Later, they were proved to be right. So Hancock loves talking about these people, loves talking about Luis Alvarez, kind of compares himself by implication. I think that's, kind of a Hancock move. But he is very excited. However, here's the problem. So thank you for being patient with that preamble. Here is the problem. Based on the timeline, based on Hancock's theory, based on the theory of all of the Atlantis proponents that I know of, a comet strike at the beginning of the Younger Dryas doesn't tell us anything. In fact, it tells us that the civilization of Atlantis survived that comet strike because the calamity that brought an end to Atlantis happened at the end of the Younger Dryas. So it happened 1,200 years later. And Hancock rarely points this out. I think hopes that his audience will get lost in talk of strikes and catastrophes and earth-shaking disasters and not really think too much about the details. But his theory, right, is that there had to have been some calamity at the end of the Younger Dryas. So a comet strike, if that theory were to turn out to be true at the beginning of the Younger Dryas, it doesn't tell us anything. It doesn't. It's irrelevant as far as bringing an end to Atlantis, because the theory tells us that Atlantis survived and thrived for at least another 1,200 years. So what is Hancock's theory about how it was wiped out? So check this out. I am not making this up. This is the part that no scientist on the planet subscribes to. So this meteor split 12,850 or what have you years ago. It split. It was a bigger meteor. It broke in two, and one half, that's what happened 12,850 years ago, is one half of that meteor hit Iceland and Greenland. So it split. They went in different trajectories, but lo and behold, after 1,200 years of orbiting around the solar system or galaxy or what have you, the second half of this meteor, I'm not kidding you, comes back to Earth and crashes into the ocean, sends up massive amounts of water vapor and this type of thing into the air, canceling out the effects of its brother, its sibling meteor that had struck Earth in Iceland and Greenland 1,200 years prior. I mean, it's so absurd. What are the odds? What are the odds? It's one of these 10 to the 50th, what have you, powers. Your odds are better of winning the Powerball 6 consecutive times type of thing. There's just absolutely no way. It would have been more plausible just to come up with an idea about a different meteor striking Earth. I guess that would be possible. Now, what Hancock tries to tie this to is something called Meltwater Pulse 1b. And this was a period of time where ocean levels were rising rather quickly, much quicker than they are today. As the Younger Dryas, as we were coming out of that Younger Dryas, the Earth was warming up pretty quickly. And somewhere in that increase in ocean levels, Graham Hancock is proposing that there was a catastrophic tidal wave caused by this second half of the meteor. The problem with that is that Meltwater Pulse 1b begins prior to the end of the Younger Dryas, several hundred years prior to the end of the Younger Dryas. And if you see what I'm saying, and there really is no evidence of too much in the way of sudden catastrophic tidal waves and this type of thing. So it's a ridiculous theory. And it's the part that he leaves out, the second half of the comet, because the first strike in his theory is meaningless. It doesn't make any difference. However, Graham Hancock hopes, I'm pretty sure that his most of his followers really don't look into this too hard. That's his theory. Now, on to Göbekli Tepe, which pops up about 250 years later, after the end of the Younger Dryas. So Hancock's theory is that a remnant of this civilization comes and runs into the people at Göbekli Tepe. Now, before I go any further, Graham Hancock also thinks and has suggested that there are much, much older structures at Göbekli Tepe that have yet to be excavated. It seems like the oldest stone was around 9,300, 9,400 years ago, but he thinks perhaps it can go back much farther. Well, let's say that it does, Mr. Hancock. Let's say that it does go back farther. Now, what are we dealing with? We're dealing with a civilization that was concurrent with Atlantis, or do you want to say that those were Atlanteans? And if they were, why were they using such primitive technology? See, all of these different problems come about that he really doesn't address this, but that is his theory. It's going to go back much farther. But as it is now, he has to come up with a theory, and it is this remnant population from Atlantis that wandered around for about 200, 250 years before coming into contact with these people and doing a technology transfer, as Graham Hancock calls it. It's something else. So this remnant for a couple hundred years, I guess they were reproducing and what have you, but instead of making use of this technology again and getting things going again and restarting this Atlantean civilization, they decided to wander, keep it to themselves, and then they bumped into these people living in southeast Anatolia and northern Syria, the folks at the time who built all of these tepe things, all of these structures on top of mounds, many of them made with megaliths. They transfer the technology to them. And what Graham Hancock will do is he sets up an either or. So he sets up, I've heard him say this on a number of occasions. He'll say, either I need to see some kind of stuff leading up to this, or it's a technology transfer, as he describes it, meaning you have this one civilization just divesting itself of this knowledge, giving it up like you would give someone a chair. Used to be my chair, now it's your chair. Used to be my knowledge, but now it's your knowledge. That kind of a thing. I mean, what isn't a technology transfer in the rational way that happens, where people share information and teach one another? I mean, you look at any building and you're looking at generations and generations of apprentices learning from the guys before, so on and so forth, new technical skills that come into play, the engineers, the electricians, the masons, all that. You're looking at generations of technology transfer, to technology sharing, skill sharing, this type of thing. So this theory that he has is kind of strange and represents something that we really don't see in known history. We're going to give you this information. Now, another thing that Hancock does is he attempts to make Göbekli Tepe sound like some kind of an engineering marvel, and it really isn't, or technological marvel. And this is something I've seen him do in a few cases. So he claims that it is built on a perfect north to south axis, and this means that these people had knowledge of astronomy. Well, I'm not sure what he's talking about. If you look at Göbekli Tepe, it's sort of a splattering of these hinges. So I'm not sure what axis he is referring to, but even if it is, that's not really all that impressive at all. That just means that they were able to identify the star in the sky that didn't move. Not a terrifically advanced thing to do. And built it that way. But otherwise, what you're looking at is quarrying stones. It's been shown not to be, it does not require super advanced skills. You get limestone, well, there's a lot of rocks that are harder than limestone. Now you get enough guys together, chop, 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 make ropes this way, make ropes that way, get different things to roll them over. It's 1,001 trials and error. And within a few years, a couple generations, they're going to get very good at it, moving and quarrying these 3 to 6 ton megaliths, which I think is the heavy majority of them are that range. Standing them upright, whatever they were using them for. It's not an engineering marvel. It's a marvel in terms of a collective effort, the specialists you would have needed and this type of thing. Where now we have to move the time frame of hundreds of people getting together to accomplish a particular job. We got to move that back a ways. So it's impressive on that level, but it's not an engineering marvel at all. It's not the kind of thing you're going to be able to do because somebody gives you secret special knowledge like these people of Atlantis. And that does raise another question. I mean, it's what's so great about it? If Atlantis was supposed to be at a technology level, as Hancock has said, around that of the Great Britain during the height of the British Empire, that level of technology, then it's pretty, lousy stuff, isn't it? I mean, if they were operating at that level, why is it that we have something appear there that is the kind of earliest, crudest form of technology? And we've advanced so much since then. Were the Atlanteans that backwards? So there's a whole bunch of reasons why it's just a Silly theory, technology transfer. Well, it was the people there at the time who built it, obviously. And that's one of those things that default assumption, unless you've got serious evidence to the contrary, and we don't. And the reason why it pops up sort of that type of structure out of nowhere is once people settled down, once people started claiming land, they got good at building things pretty quick. Uh, a migratory lifestyle, you're just not going to build anything because you're going to be gone soon. But once people settled down, organized themselves around agriculture, people were smart. Those henges don't represent genius or anything like that. They just represent serious amount of collective effort. Now, one thing Hancock does in this debate that I think is really disingenuous is he says that we know that Göbekli Tepe was built by hunter-gatherers. And this is coming from someone who has made such a stink on so many occasions about these artificial timelines that archaeologists are stuck to. Well, we don't know that it was built by hunter-gatherers. It seems to have been built around the period of time where the transition was being made from hunter-gathering to steady agriculture. And that's what Göbekli Tepe shows. That's what it tells us. They were hunting game. It would have been about the most fertile place in the world at the time. This region of southeast Anatolia, what today is northern Syria, it was the northern triangle of the Fertile Crescent, so rich soils, all these types of things. A great place for agriculture to get started, and that seems to have been what was happening. So for Hancock to stick to this and say, well, we know for a fact that these were hunter-gatherers, we don't. And if Atlantis was an agricultural society, as we're claiming, then why didn't they give them the whole package? Why didn't they give them the whole agricultural technology from the get-go? Why didn't they give them some nice seeds? Why didn't they? Yeah, you get what I'm saying. This doesn't make any sense. It's an absolutely ridiculous theory. The fact of the matter is that Göbekli Tepe is a big black eye in Hancock's theory. So you have Atlantis that's supposed to be happening up until the end of the Younger Dryas. Well, there's no evidence for it at all. There's no technology, nothing left over, no buildings, no structures, no boats, not anything that we can see. Nothing in the record about how people were living at that time, 15 or so thousand years ago, as hunter-gatherers. No trace of any influence of this advanced sophisticated civilization. However, a couple hundred years after it was supposed to have gone kaput, up pops these structures inland. Now, another part of the theory as to why no physical evidence remained is because, well, they never went inland. They never went upstream for whatever reason. It seems kind of silly to me. That's why there's no physical evidence. Well, inland, a couple hundred years after Göbekli Tepe is supposed to have gone kaput. Excuse me, Atlantis was supposed to have died. Here we have these structures. So we had to come up with this bizarre theory, but that is Graham Hancock's actual theory. I don't know how people defend it other than getting kind of lost in the vagaries. So comet strike and then end of it something or whatever. And if you don't think about it too hard, it can seem plausible. But it is a ridiculous theory, and that is literally Graham Hancock's theory.